Great. So Perry Timms, author, famous person now, and to many, and friend of Beamible and friend of me too. I've loved getting to know you over the last number of months, and I'm just so inspired by your ideas. So I was hoping to share them with more of the world as well.
Great.
So Perry, can you tell us just a little bit about the work you do and what you're energized by?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. So thanks for the lovely intro, Steph. Yeah, so energy is important to me, and that's why I'm called a chief energy officer. But I mean that's a little play on CEO of my own enterprise. So I've been in recent history in the HR profession, coming up for year 23. So it's really within me, and I kind of found it, and it found me. So when you say you're in HR, people kind of think, oh right, so you hire people, fire people, build really boring, spoiling policies and stuff like that. It's like, oh my goodness me, there's so much more to it. Yeah, so I operate in the space where it's all about people, culture, learning, progress. And I've got this massive sense of organizations really underplaying the role of their business enterprise or whatever in people having a purposeful way about their life. So I don't like the term work-life balance. I like the term a balanced life, and work is a huge part of it. And luckily, my work has given me a real sense of identity in what I'm here to do. So I help organisations with things like organisation design, so the structure and the flow. But I also like to look at all the interactions and the relationships that people have, both with themselves, the system, and the ultimate impact they want to have. So I boil it down to performance, because I mean that's what it's all about. It's performance, but that's not at any cost, is it? It's balanced performance where people come alive through what they're doing and feel a sense of fulfillment by delivering on a purpose. And you can only do that if you perform well. So I'm always interested in the moving parts. I've come to be known as what I guess you'd call a systems thinker. So I'm fascinated by the interrelationships of things and flows and things we don't even notice all the time. So I get into theorizing and go deep in areas that, I wish I'd studied in my younger days, but there's never too late to learn. So so that's kind of what I do. So it has a consulting frame around it, but I mean, I'm absolutely up for what I call additionality, where people just need something additional, and I help provide that.
Additionality, I love it, and I love all of your analogies. So I hope we'll hear a lot of those today.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks so much, Perry. So I've got 5 questions for you because I was struggling with so many questions I wanted to ask you.
Cool.
I've whittled it down to 5.
Nice.
So the first one is about your new book. So the HR operating model, designing a people function that supports workforce and the business.
Yeah.
And in this, you argue that the traditional Ulrich model is no longer fit for purpose. Agree. And introduce a new HR 3.0, a blueprint built on 4 pillars: people experience, data, agility, and tech. So you've mentioned that HR needs to move from service delivery to value creation. Again, completely agree. But I think the how of that seems far away from for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Can you, where do people start with that? How do you tell us a bit more?
All of those things I think are key traits of what an operating model should do, but it is almost like the essence of an operating model is literally that blueprint. And those things that you talked about are almost like, well, what do they manifest as, right? So you don't build an operating model and say, well, let's create a data function and let's create an agile thing. You don't do that. You set it up as a platform where there are spaces that are intentionally guiding what those things then come out as, right? So I looked at the Ulrich model of business partnering, center of excellence, and shared service, and I thought, well, for a start, it doesn't mean anything to people except if you're in HR, right? They kind of go center of excellence. So like clearly excellence goes on in there, but like what? It's not a very descriptive term. So I wanted to abandon those and give people something even broader, but people go, oh yeah. So where you start is almost like, well, what is that value creation that HR is there to do? And that's products that people in an organization consume to do something, to do a job, to solve a problem, whatever it is, right? But HR people do not talk about what they do as products. They are policies and practices and regulations. I mean, it couldn't be more dull, but it's necessary, right? But even that, they're all products. They are all things built with an outcome in mind that creates value in some shape or form. For the organisation, some of those things might be, how do you protect the organisation from individual misdemeanors? That's what often comes into play. But equally, as an individual, how are you protected from the organisation being oppressive and unfair? Now, there's an outcome there, and there's value creation, and a product gives you that. So that's where I always say people should start. What are your products? And HR people think about it for a while and go, oh yeah, they are products, aren't they? Because we build them. They have a staged, almost like process. They need adaptation when things change. So yeah, it's a product. And of course, you need processes to underpin that, right? Because that's how you access them. That's how you flow them through. That's how you then sense check them and base them in the reality of regulation or fairness or whatever it is. So if you want, in the model, that's the kind of vertical part of it. Then the horizontal part of it is where I really come alive. And that's through the systems that HR has to either create or operate within. That's the organisation systems. But that in itself operates in the systems of the markets and capital and, again, regulation, society, community, environment. But then all the internal systems, like who makes decisions, where does power sit, how do you move around it, how do you engineer it so if it's stuttering, you can intervene and change it so it's smarter and swifter and flows better. So there's the systems bit, and then linked to that, because I think it is absolutely linked to that, science. So if we talk about pure systems, then people will talk about things like complexity science and kind of random chaotic things, and then long tail research. So the science I think about a lot for HR people is like people science, so psychology, sociology, even anthropology. Now, again, HR teams are not known for that, but I know there are lots of people professionals who came to it because they got qualified in psychology and they thought, what am I going to do with it? And the people profession has got a natural sort of pathway for it, whether it's developing people, handling things like complex traumas that happen in the workplace. So we've got a lot of people with underutilized skill, I think, in the profession. And some people have said to me even, shouldn't all of HR be psychologists? And the answer is no, because it's so broad. That would narrow it down to just almost like clinicians inside the organisation. It needs a bit of that, but it needs a lot more. We need people who are really good analysts, people who are really good at creative solutions, people who are absolutely attuned to human psychology and sort of motivation and stuff like that. So that's where that horizontal part of it comes in. So by having those four intersectional areas, my invitation to HR is quite literally use that as the blueprint to then launch into whatever you want to do on top of that, for the context, the sector you're in, the scale that you're at. So a lot of people I've worked with have already kind of overlaid people experience over the top of it. So from the initial, we want you to come and work with us, to thanks for joining us, to here's what we want you to do with us, here's how we develop you, here's what else we can do for you in life episodes. Oh, and by the way, if you do exit, let's do it gracefully and you might want to come back. So all those life cycle things and this whole sense of work being part of people's life episodes is where I'm seeing much more sophisticated take than here's my policy, here's a bit of functionality, and by the way, we just do a few basic development courses. So I think it's time to evolve it to be much more dynamic and much more diversified. So that's what the model and the book is calling HR to do as a profession.
Yeah, and so it's about value creation for the business, but there's probably also value to the individuals in the function as well.
Massively.
To have a connection to the business value, speaking language of the business line.
All of that. Yeah, we often get accused of being an overhead, which is unbelievably ridiculous, because it's almost like, well, you try and run it without legal regulations and fairness and developmental cycles and so on. It's almost like we're not an overhead at all. We're the thing that actually stretches the realm and gets you more out of the human capital than you would otherwise do. I think it's just a very unheralded part of an organisation. And I understand people might sort of say, yeah, but there's mistakes in this and this doesn't work as well and you just keep stopping us from doing things. It's almost like you might not recognise that we're trying to keep you safe, but we are. So just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not right and proper for the situation that we're in. So I think we're getting a little bit fed up of that. We're getting a little bit fed up of being the sort of, I suppose, the brunt of all, kind of dissent about things, when it's actually like, now we're not batting on the side of the executive, we're batting on the side of the organisation doing the right thing. And we are people pro, but that doesn't mean to say that we bend over and just do whatever people want to do. So if they really want to kind of stretch the employment proposition to the point that they're a bit slack and they're taking more than they're giving. And it's like, well, that's not fair either. So there's consequences to that. So I think we're dealing with a lot of sensitive stuff, and I don't think people give it credit.
Right, till now.
Yeah,
so
till now.
yeah, so people can read about this in your book.
Yep, for sure.
And follow you on LinkedIn, learn more about
all of that.
the
YouTube
new
stuff. There's some talks and all that. Yeah,
the TIMS operating model.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not really calling it that. I'm keeping the HR 3.0 thing, because I always intended to write this book and build this model so it would be the professions model, not some professor or scientist or even practitioner. So I'll happily be associated with it forever, but I hope people continue to call it 3.0 and just drive it that way.
Love that about you. So my next question is HR as product managers. So one of the key roles that you talk about within that is your HR product manager.
Yeah.
And this obviously requires a bit of a different skill set than a traditional HR business partner or center of excellence, generalist and whatnot. So if you're a CHRO or a CPO and you're thinking about how do I start to implement this, are you thinking about a skill, sort of a reskilling? Do we need to bring in people from our product function? How do you start to think about that?
Yeah. So I think the short answer to that is it is a reskilling and an upskilling and a diversification thing for sure, because it is very obviously not present except in the most pioneering people teams I've seen. So some of those pioneering people teams have got perhaps the agile bug, and so they're used to working in sprints and driving MVPs and so on. As a result of that, they will not have ignored the product mindset and the product management approach. So they will probably have naturally evolved and developed product management roles within them. So, but they are a really tiny exception on the sort of bell curve of innovation. They're the absolute pioneers. But the majority of HR people wouldn't recognize it. However, as an example, when I've unpacked what a product manager looks for and what a product is, they kind of go, oh yeah, we do some of that, because we have customer interactions or participation from colleagues. I'm like, well, yeah, product managers do that. They stress test the concept of the product and the early iterations of it, and then the kind of downstream deployment of it. So they recognize some of it. But yeah, I mean, as a skill, I think product management has got acutely sharp in what it looks for from people. So there are people out there that we know, and in fact, we were introduced to each other by Chris Metcalf, who've really got the people theme and the product theme and have almost created their own version of an excellent kind of adaptation of what you find normally in tech. So they've probably got tech in their company, and they've probably got product managers in their company, and they could learn a bit from them, but they'd need to seriously contextualize it. So I think there are people doing that synthesis out there, and I'm really glad they are. And I'm sort of admiring the fact that people like Chris and Luke Omani are kind of pitching it really high and going, well, the whole concept of work is a product and the people experience is a product. I do admire that, but I find you've got to bring it home a little bit nearer and say, right, well, start with your policies, make them a product, because that will make them much more appeasable and amenable and absorbable and actionable. And that's a way of creating more elegance out of those than blunt instrument. But then there's learning and development, there's onboarding, there's your employer brand, there's your recruitment experience. I mean, there are so many things that put in a product management approach to would not just sharpen them up, it will supercharge them, it will give them far better impact. And I think what we would find then is the previous conversation we just had about not recognizing the value HR offers. I think when the business notices things like that, they'll be kind of like, wow, where did that come from? That's a really nice version of that. And they'll start to understand why perhaps we've been a little bit functional and almost like regulatory. And now we're going into much more of the realms of powerful interventions and that value creation and impact you talked about. And I think then that'll spark interest, that people will want to play more in that space because they'll want to be associated with those good products. So I think it will open the doors for us to get more participation, but I think it's a skill we absolutely will need. I can't see when that skill will run out, because I think no matter what the future looks like, there will be products we'll need to build, and they'll probably get ever more complex. So I think it's a good one to start now and build and get the credentials and get the experience, because When we talk about a world where we're managing agentic AI agents and all sorts of other weirdness that might come in, wow, products take on a whole new meaning in that respect, because they're going to be hugely psychological, relational, and complex, as I say. So yeah, start now, learn it as best you can, find the people who are pushing that space, and just kind of grow that to a point that, you know, you've probably got product managers almost everywhere in your enterprise in HR.
Yep. And Chris's organisation, Red Oak, is, I think, running a really great learning program that's a sort of sprint to to teach the product. So that's
in a people culture learning context. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the important thing. I think it's not a lift and shift of what it looks like in tech. There are lots and lots of principles that come through, but I think the human element adds a depth of both science and participation that I think gives it a real twist, and Chris has really captured that. So yeah, that's a high recommendation for me too.
Awesome. So I have been reading about your commentary and an article that you were just in around the polymorphic organisation.
Yeah.
A word I had to look up. But I'm really fascinated by it, because I've been sort of searching for this word for how do we start to describe a more dynamic, organization that continuously changes. So I think, as I understand it, you're talking about sort of a living system that intentionally changes shape rather than relying on rigid hierarchies. And so for leaders who are used to static org charts, though, that sounds kind of really terrifying. A little bit and chaotic. So how would you advise they move to this concept of what we call coherence without control during those kind of shape shifts?
I mean, the good news is on that, I mean, it's kind of 20 years in the making for me. I've been inspired by companies that have departed from orthodox structures and flows and culture for quite some time. So, I mean, if we go back as far as people might recollect to like Ricardo Semler's work at Semco, when he took an engineering company and he disbanded all managerial roles, and he said, look, you're a group of engineers with a machine and clients and all that. You just run it as if it's your own P&L, and we'll stitch it all together. And it was a kind of revelation, because they just completely reinvented themselves. So for a while, that was a kind of Harvard darling case study of, maybe the future's without this supervisory layer that we brought in right at the heart of industrialism and Taylorism, like a whole 100+ years ago. So, and since then, there have been lots of other companies like Morningstar and WL Gore, who make the Gore-Tex stuff, and there's a steel manufacturer in the US called Nucor, and then you've got Buurtzorg, the nursing organisation in the Netherlands, who've got, again, no managers, self-organised teams. Now, that is a big leap of faith for people. I've been a real fan of that for a long time, like I say, but what I've seen is that's a hard departure to literally disassemble all the scaffolding you've been used to. And so I'm now come to terms with the fact that maybe that's for the real radicals, and there needs to be a more accessible and recognizable version of that for people to actually go, okay, I'll detach from orthodoxy into this because it feels safer and more like I recognize it. That's where polymorphic comes in, because the whole concept of polymorphic is it can take on many forms and shapes. So you don't have to abandon what works brilliantly well in a hierarchical construct like your legal team. Like, just keep it. But your customer team, your research team, your analysts, your tech team, whatever, they don't need to work like that just because one part of your organization does. So it can have that many forms kind of thing. So I've absolutely drawn it out where the organization is a big ellipse, and in it there's a little pyramid, because you've got your governance and your legal and all your tight stuff there. And the rest of it is just all these flowing nested circles of activity, some of which are empty at times because you haven't got any work to do in that space until you do. So it also disassembles the whole sense that you have to verticalize it, and then you just sometimes have to wait for the work, or you invent the work, or you get overpowered by the work. I'm almost saying an organization ought to flex out when there's a lot of work in, say, customer. Just chuck everything at it. And people go, well, how'd you do that then? So there was a bank in Canada called Tangerine, and they had a real challenge every year when they had an end of year thing, because they launched their results, they were inviting people to participate in the dialogue around that, new products. So literally everybody abandoned post, even the CEO went on the phones, talked to customers, whatever it was. And he got this sense. He was like, wow, why don't we do this more regularly? Why should we just do it at a time of peak work? So Tangerine literally went to a fluid, responsive way of doing things, and their deposits went up, their customer sat went up. It's just like, wow, how does this happen? Spotify, squads, same thing. The Monday morning playlist recommendation came because a group of people at Spotify said, how do we get people to go to this more? And they said, well, think about the start of the week. What do you want on your commute? What about a playlist? Oh, what a good idea. Built the product, helped grow Spotify's footprint. Because people said, I've got this playlist I didn't even make for a Monday, built on the algorithm. It's amazing. And everybody went, really? And bang, it blew up. So this is what happens when you liberate people, when you remove restrictions, friction, constraint, limitation. But you can't just do it in a, here's the field, now you're in the open wild, and people kind of go, oh, wow, what do I do here? I suddenly feel a bit discombobulated.
Yeah.
So my sense now is you've got to be gentle with people, but actually that's not an excuse to not be inventive about how you structure and change your form and flow. And what I really hate about most organizations is that you are possessed by your vertical and by your VP or director, and it's like, who said that's how it works? The organization and you own each other. We don't want all these intermediaries thinking they own you, because they don't. I mean, that's just completely rubbish. There's a duty of care that comes through, but that doesn't have to be a supervisor. You're not people's nannies. So I think there's definitely something in this childlike state we've been occupied in for far too long. I'm like, let's just let the adults out and actually remind ourselves that still as an adult, you like to play, you like to experiment, but you do it in a way that you know there's a point to it, right? So that's what a polymorphic organization essentially is. It's determined by people who aren't just sat in exec positions. It's following the flow and the energy of what your organization needs to do, because outside, inside, data's telling you that's what we've got to do.
So if there's structure's fluid, what's the anchor? Is it that particular business strategy, the particular job to be done? What's the sort of thing that makes sure people don't sort of drift?
Purpose, mission, vision, values. I mean, we have them, but they just feel like the wallpaper. They just don't make people come alive, because we put all these interfering processes and protocols and so on, thinking it's safer, but actually it is just more restrictive, and it makes those things feel quite distant and almost nebulous to the point. So you bring them nearer to you and you go, what am I purposely doing to that? How am I building that? What I do to the mission and so on. So you invite people to think about that much more. So they are anchoring it. And when we build strategies and business plans, they're just interpretive of the moment manifestations of all of that in one place. But most people don't even know what their strategy is. They look at their workload and they might know their business plan or quarterly plan, but they've sort of forgotten what the strategy. I mean, what a travesty. And almost strategy is probably sitting there going, well, what was the point in putting me together then? I mean, I want to come out and help. So I think there's something about how can we make them more normalized, regularized daily. Well, remove the noise and the interference, and make that what, like you said, is both an anchor and a pull, right? I mean, it's got to be both. It keeps you safe, but it pulls you towards better, progressive, and the impact you want to have. So I think I've given up trying to trickle it through a dense hierarchy and saying, right, disassemble some of that and get people to feel nearer to it, because then that's when they know what they signed up to in the first place. It's not a rank and privilege thing either. There are some people who might be called the frontline workers. Well, they're the manifestation of what it's all about anyway, because they're touching the customer and they're helping the customer, whatever it is. So it's like they should feel it more than people sat in a VP office. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's something about flipping that.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, the work we do as well. There's a nice connection point there, because it's understanding at that task level which tasks are directly connected to the strategy, and that helps people have a moment to think intentionally about how does my work have an impact, how does it directly connect to the strategy. Do more of that.
And well, not just because we're on this call, right, but the reason I like your product so much is because for the first time I've seen a piece of technology that brings people's attention to what they do is linked to purpose, mission, vision, value, strategy, whatever, right? Because we just go through it so much, it's kind of like a mush, almost like a whirlwind. We don't notice it. We have a big backlog, or we're out there fixing stuff, or we're in a drain, or we're caring for somebody. We just kind of in the moment do it because that's what we've got to do. But we don't make the mental attachment to the reason I'm doing this is because now what you've done by kind of forensically analysing that, giving people the chance to almost journal their way into this, people kind of go, oh yeah, that's it, yeah, it's linked to that, isn't it? That's why I do it. Yeah, actually, yeah, I ought to feel that more because it makes me feel good when I know that what I do is contributing to something bigger than I am. So that's why I love what your product is.
Oh, thanks, Perry. There's a lot of crossovers here. So that takes us actually to the fourth question, which is around strategic workforce planning. So you've described strategic workforce planning as needing to be supercharged, moving beyond simple headcount budgeting to mapping capability flows. I think strategic workforce planning has been in the back office. It's been sitting with even finance.
Spreadsheet.
It almost needs a rebrand. So, but strategic workforce planning actually are the right words. So, what's happening in this space?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about where it's been sat. It's been a sort of collation function rather than anything that absolutely gives you intelligence and wisdom about your human capital and where it should be and what it could be. I think we've been so HR partly, but also businesses don't really understand it. They think it's just a resource plan. It's like, no, it's way more than that. And so we, I think in HR, have underplayed it too often. And now I think it's starting to become really critical at the right time. So it's no surprise that you and I are both talking about it, because probably about 5 years ago, it was like, we should do more of that, surely. And then obviously COVID hit and da-da-da. But the essence of it is, have we got the intelligence about both what our people are capable of and what we need them to do? The kind of two things are the starting point of all of this. And let's just put it down to some basics, right? When I start any consulting exercise about workforce planning, I say to either the chief people officer or the exec team, what are your organizational capabilities? They're like, what do you mean? Competencies? I'm like, no. What are the things that if your organization was a person or a job, what must they have in order to drive your business to the outcomes you want? And then they give me a laundry list of stuff, and I'm like, okay, there's probably some of the capabilities in that, but I want you to know in 5 descriptions, what must you have in order? And they're like, oh yeah, I totally get you, right? So we are heavy on intellect and analytical skills because we're a really knowledge-based. I'm like, right, now you're getting somewhere. So we've never discovered that quickly enough. So that's the first thing. If anybody's listening to this, where do I start? You have to map out your biggest org capabilities that drive you forward, because everything trickles through from them into the levels that you've got and the roles that you build. But you're totally right. So we go from collation on a spreadsheet, which is perhaps just nice to look at, to those things like value chains, to those things like impact back kind of thinking. So, in tech, impact mapping is a thing, right? Because you sort of go, well, who are the actors and what are the problems and how do we put the processes in and what's the goal we want to get to? It's just a version of that in a way. But the thing I like about it most is it doesn't just stop at collating what do we need and what have we got and how do we line that up. It is also what else do we need and how do we close gaps. So there's a lovely loop then into talent development, career development, learning and development, because it's almost like we've missed the point of some of the development activity we've done. We've just kept piling it on thinking that's how you do it. It's like, no, look at your workforce plan and go, what's light and hot and gaps and different and what do we need now? What do we need next? That's what your L&D agenda should be built around. So it's no wonder L&D's misfiring, because we haven't got enough workforce data that shows us exactly what we should be delivering. A lot of people have said, isn't it about, performance and solving problems? Well, yeah, it is, but that's what your workforce plan should give you, an indication of what performance looks like and an indication of where your problems are to be solved and gaps. So it spirals out, Steph, which is, you kind of like think, well, no wonder a lot of things are just kind of random and thrown out when the really coherent point is what you pull together from your workforce plan. So it isn't just how do I keep on top of resourcing. It's not a TA only thing. It's an entire human performance, almost like nuclear power center that you need to then spin the energy off it.
And we would argue that you need to get a current state of what the current organisation's actually doing, and that's currently too much of a black box. I heard it described as, but it's a lack of visibility into what people are actually doing, the skills they have, as well as the potential. Just how can you plan on the future? Yeah,
exactly.
Strategic workforce planning will become, and is becoming very quickly, a much more critical capability because of all of the impact of what AI can do at the task level. So I think it's
I think if we're looking at the whole business performance thing and say, an F1 race or the Le Mans 24-hour, what you're talking about there is what you do is go, well, let's get the practice laps right. Let's look at the data set. Did we get the right hydration in the driver? Have we got the right lubricants at the right levels for that optimum speed thing? So what you're doing there is, it is a kind of part of the race, but it's the get yourself ready for the race. That's what you're talking about there. But it doesn't stop there, because you do that repeatedly, because you need to test that it's all working in a harmonious kind of way. This is where it comes back to a complex adaptive system and so on. You can do some of that by sensing, but you can do a lot more of it when you've got the kind of data rich qualities that you're talking about. But they're not just data on statistical numerical, they are about sentiment and energy and motivation. Because if you don't have them, you've only got the engine, you haven't got the driver's concentration and the driver's skill level. That's where the thing will go off track, quite literally. So you're more than practice that. You get it ready for the race, and then you help it continually tune during the race.
That analogy. And tell us a little bit about the course that you're running on strategic workforce planning.
For exactly that point, really, to take it not as an academic teachable concept, but to immerse people in the core of it, like what it should look like in a sort of professional discipline sense, so that we build from a baseline that those people who would kind of regulate the market would say, oh yeah, that's what it is, but also deal with that adjacency, deal with the future pivots that might come through, but importantly, I think, deal with the dynamic of how work is right now, i.e. strategic workforce planning ain't a one and done. Like, it's a way of life. You've got to start somewhere, but then how do you build that cadence into the regularity and the normality of how things work? And I think it's an attempt by us to say you got to be smart in a lot of areas: talent acquisition, employer brand, org design, careers, science and psychology, business flow, process and value chains. And then ultimately that thing about impact. It's like, if you do workforce planning, you have got to measure the success of it as if it were a ring-fenced sort of venture, to prove to people that they continue with it and enhance it and grow it.
Because another product.
It completely is like a super product, because I've seen people make a really good start, get a really good foothold, and guess what? The normal world just gradually drifts it down, and you've got to start all over again. That's such a travesty, really. So we're helping teach people how to kind of normalize it and bring it in as a mental model and a kind of repeatable habit, not just a thing that's an initiative. But I think productizing it gives it a real focal point, and then you want people to kind of go, I want to do my bit for that product, because that's giving me back an enormous amount of data and almost like confidence, really, that we're deploying human capital in such a powerful way. And your employee engagement survey is a plug-in to this, because it's almost like, if people tell us this stuff, how does that tabulate with our workforce plan? Because it might be a bit off kilter, it might be we haven't been very vocal about a certain opportunity. So actually it gives you a chance to then go back and say, hey, we've ratified what you've said by our workforce plan and our sort of data set for that. You're absolutely right, this is what we're going to do. And that feels like a listening organization then. So the workforce plan does far more than resource allocation.
Yep. So people can find your course at PTHR website.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. That's right. Yeah, and on LinkedIn and all that. Yeah.
So the last question is about preserving the soul in a data-driven model. So I think your work, and this is probably what really formed the connection and the foundations for our partnership, is your work has really always had a strong emphasis on the human spirit, energy, and meaning making.
Yeah.
And you've even called HR the conscience of the organization.
Yeah.
So as we move towards this model that's more heavily integrated with AI, and a lot of people are looking to find efficiencies that way, how do you sort of make sure you're not sort of optimizing the soul out of the function?
I mean, it's really apt you talk about that now, because I've just reviewed a piece and then kind of critiqued it and kind of kicked it in the shins a bit from McKinsey about the agentic organization. And honestly, I read it and it left me cold, and then I got a bit of rage bait because it was all about us supervising AI agents. I mean, it sounded like the Matrix, like in real. So I was like, whoa, I'm not having this, because it just felt like it was over indexing on the technologies, and almost like, look, I'm not being funny, but like organizations don't exist to create technology that helps them do what they do. They exist to do what they do, and the tech is a part of that. So it's just got the wrong balance. Yeah. People come alive by things that give them a sense of value, meaning, worth, and so on in the world, right? So and you know, people might say, well, what if you're a coder? You're just like staring at a screen building code. It's like, you know, that literally you're the bricklayer at Sagrada Familia. Yes, you're laying bricks, but people stand back and look at the monument. So it's like that sort of deferred sense of pride is absolutely still how we look at the work we do, right? We know we are not all Picasso, but we at least know that we come alive and do something in honor of that sort of artistry. So yeah, it ignored all that. And there's loads and loads of social science that talks about the meaning of work and the value it has to us, and what it does to create our identity. So I was really worried about the fact that if we become like, you know, digital machine supervisors, like our identity is just going to completely disappear, and we'll be just bland, grey, zombified individuals. And it's like, we won't have that. We will push back on that. We will rebel against it, and we will hack it, and we will do something different. So I'd rather us not have to do that. I'd rather us design it with human intent in the first place, but utterly exploiting what technology can offer. The way I look at it, Steph, is we have too much work to do right now in the world of work. Yet about 90 years ago, the economist John Maynard Keynes looked at technological advancement and said, we're probably only going to have to work 15 hours a week in the year 2000. Well, it's 15 hours a day. So like something's gone wrong in that, right? And I think it's because, yeah, we've just piled it on, and we haven't really built a system that compensates for it. So we've got this odd schizophrenic relationship with the industrial era and the kind of technological era, and we haven't quite worked out where we are yet. I think it's like, well, we can put industrial to bed, literally, we can, because we can just go purely for the tech, but not to the point that we siliconize everything, because that's not what it's about. Just like we don't want to, you know, industrialize everything, because we've pushed away from that. We've got art still and care and all that. So I think the system will tell us actually that isn't the way forward, because it needs to liberate us to do more relational, caring, complex, imaginative types of work that machines just could never do, because they're not sentient. So yeah, you know, that sounded like I went into realms of lots of science fiction movies and so on, but I know the human spirit is too strong to be oppressed for too long. So let's not even bother with the oppression. Let's go straight to the reason that it's good, and I think people will do that. So yeah, the whole sense of an organization having powerful, sustainable, and lasting value in the world isn't down to what technology they use. It's down to the people that it draws into them who keep it alive. That's literally it. Like, you look at some of the most long-standing, successful organizations in the world, it's because people have a sense of duty, devotion, and want to keep it going, right? The legacy and the future are absolutely coexistent. I'll give you an example. In the charity world, most charities exist because one person said, I don't like this wrongdoing to humankind, animal kind, planet kind, whatever. I'm going to bring people to me and kind of get something going. And then hundreds of years later, they might be a multinational, tens of thousands of people, non-profit, doing great work. But that started with one person who had a dream and a few people who came together. It's like, whenever we step into that, we're honoring that, and we're continuing that. That's more powerful than any contract you can sign. When you feel attached to something that's so powerful, that's when you become who you're meant to be. Now, we can't synthesize that, we can't siliconize that. So that's why I think the tech thing feels like it's going machine, machine, machine. But there is a good consequence to that. It's because we'll remind ourselves of what it means to be a relational human. Simple as that.
Yep. And it's going to be our humans that differentiate an organization. So if we all became just managers of robots, supervisors, then every organization does that, and all of a sudden we become obsolete because it's commoditized. It's always going to be that human creativity, the innovation, the ideas that haven't been trained because they don't exist yet, that helps organizations to move forward and connect with their customers and all of that.
People learn from people, right? I mean, that goes back as far as you can take to our earliest primeval state, and then our tribal kind of distillation of heritage and language and so on. That's what keeps us safe. That's what keeps it meaningful for us, and that hasn't changed and won't change. That's kind of who we are and how we are. So this weird thing about the spirit that we have, and this kind of personality and the thought process, we're kind of unique in the animal world for that. But we've crafted it in such a way that several big shifts in how the world throws stuff at you, whether it's mass religion and colonialism and all that kind of stuff, right? Still, what comes out of it is we are brought to life by the others around us, and we do things to preserve and to strengthen what that is, no matter what it is. So, stuff like Dave Graeber's The Law of Everything and Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens will tell you everything you need to know about why we are how we are and what that's likely to look like in the future. And the answer is different, but the same.
Okay. Watch this space. So they're all my questions.
Cool.
I'm curious if people are listening to this and they sort of want to know, is PTHR, an organization that can help me? Like, can you tell us just a little bit about what the types of organizations that would be a good fit for you are?
Yeah. So there's no real size, sector or scale for us, but we will work along the spectrum. But mostly we're brought in by chief people officers, CHROs and their teams to either help them because of capability and capacity and systems and change within them, or for the organization. So we kind of support HR teams in bigger organizational change, either that they're part of it or they want to drive it. So there's kind of two areas. We help an HR team with itself, and we help an HR team with the rest of the organization. And we do discrete one-off things and pulsating, regularized things with a window of opportunity. We don't often kind of come in and just coexist with you for a long period of time. We're more, we want to equip you so that gradually we kind of disappear and you don't need us anymore. So we work to a point of irrelevance, but that's great because then we know we've got them better than they were when we started, and they'll succeed without us. So so we're not that kind of consultancy that just kind of clamps themselves on you for a while. We prefer to give you that sense of interdependency and then total independence. So no job too big or no complex thing that we won't kind of dive into, but generally speaking, there's change, transformation, learning, skill, and something different needed, then that's when we come in.
Love it. Final question for you is, if you think about a week in the life of Perry Timms, I'm sure they're vastly different as well. What would be the most energizing work that you do?
Okay, right. So I think it's at the start of an engagement with a potential new client when they are describing to me the circumstances of their organization, what they feel is going wrong, what they really want it to look like, all the elements and components and the parts that have contributed to the fact that they're having a conversation with me. And it's then me taking that in and kind of rolling it around my thought process, throwing things in that I know might be valuable to them, and then putting that back to them saying, this is what I think is the art of the possible. It's quite literally like they've commissioned me as an artist. I haven't done the painting yet, but here's the sketch and the color palette. I mean, I love that bit because everything's possible at that point in time. I mean, sometimes they come back and go, well, you're nuts, we're not doing that, or we can't afford that, or whatever. But the majority of it is what I want people to kind of go, oh, wow, I wouldn't have thought of that. And it's like, well, if that's the case, I'm glad you came to me then, because if you wouldn't have thought of it, the only time it would have come out is by engaging me in it. So I love the fact that I take what they have and they don't know what they want yet, but I help show them what they could have and what they might have been thinking about. There's something really nice about that. Even if the work then kind of goes through the machinations and it ends up looking a bit different. I love that art of the possible stuff at the start. That's literally me in my sweetest spot ever. Moonshots, anything's
Amazing.
possible, all that. I love that bit. And I've had quite a bit of that lately, and I've really enjoyed it. I mean, I was up till 1 a.m. this morning doing a bit of that.
Passion. Well, you mentioned that not everyone's a Picasso, but you just might be in this world of reinventing and painting
I
the new
love that.
future.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
so thank you so much for sharing
Yeah.
so openly and all your ideas. There's so much more there, but yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks,
Thank you,
Perry.
Steph. Good luck with Beamible and everything you're doing. Thanks a lot.